Jessica Taylor was living the dream. With over 5 million followers on Instagram, she'd become one of the most sought-after models in the digital world. Brands clamored for her endorsements, and her posts regularly garnered thousands of likes within minutes. Yet, behind the filtered perfection of her online presence, Jessica was all too aware of the dangers lurking in the shadows of her fame. Her rise to stardom had been meteoric. Discovered at a local fashion show at 18, she quickly caught the eye of several high-profile photographers. Her natural beauty and keen sense for trends made her a favorite among brands targeting young, affluent consumers. Jessica's daily life became a series of photo shoots, brand meetings, and jet-setting across the globe. She loved the thrill of it all, but she never forgot the warnings her mother had given her about the dark side of fame. It was a late summer evening when Jessica finished a high-profile photo shoot in downtown Los Angeles. As the crew packed up, she lingered for a few moments, responding to comments on her latest post. She didn't notice the black van idling a few feet away, nor the 3 men watching her intently. The attack was swift. In a matter of seconds, Jessica was grabbed from behind, a cloth pressed over her nose and mouth. She struggled, but the world around her quickly blurred into darkness. When she regained consciousness, she found herself in a dimly lit room, her hands and feet bound. Panic set in as she realized the gravity of her situation. Her captors revealed themselves one by one. There was Mark, a tall and muscular man with a cruel glint in his eyes. Ethan, wiry and nervous, seemed to be the brains of the operation, always calculating, always watching. And then there was Liam, the youngest of the trio, whose boyish looks belied a disturbing intensity. They had been following Jessica for months, their obsession growing with each new post she made. In their twisted minds, they believed they were in love with her, that she belonged to them. The first days of captivity were a blur of fear and confusion for Jessica. Her captors kept her in a small, windowless room, feeding her just enough to keep her alive. They took turns watching over her, each with his own brand of menace. Mark was the most physically intimidating, often threatening her with violence. Ethan's threats were more psychological, reminding her constantly of how hopeless her situation was. Liam, disturbingly, tried to befriend her, speaking softly and bringing her small comforts, which only served to unsettle her further. Jessica knew she couldn't rely on anyone to rescue her. Her only chance was to outsmart her captors and escape on her own. She began to pay close attention to their routines, looking for any weaknesses she could exploit. She also started to feign compliance, hoping to gain their trust and lower their guard. After several days of careful observation, Jessica noticed that Mark and Ethan would sometimes leave the house together, leaving Liam to guard her alone. She decided to focus on Liam, sensing he was the most susceptible to manipulation. She began to engage him in conversation, pretending to show interest in his life and his twisted sense of affection for her. One evening, after Mark and Ethan had left, Jessica made her move. She persuaded Liam to untie her hands so they could share a meal together. As they ate, she kept the conversation light, biding her time. When Liam turned his back for a moment, Jessica seized a heavy candlestick from the table and struck him on the head with all her strength. Liam crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Jessica knew she had little time. She quickly searched Liam for the keys and unlocked the door. As she stepped out of the room, she heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. Mark and Ethan were back. Jessica's heart raced as she hid behind a door, holding the candlestick tightly. Mark entered first, his eyes narrowing as he saw Liam lying on the floor. He turned just in time to see Jessica lunging at him. The fight was brutal, but Jessica's desperation gave her the edge. She managed to overpower Mark, delivering a fatal blow. Ethan, hearing the commotion, rushed in. Unlike Mark, Ethan was more cautious and calculating. He circled Jessica, a knife in hand, taunting her. Jessica, still holding the candlestick, matched his movements, waiting for an opening. When Ethan lunged, she sidestepped and struck him with all her might. The blow didn't kill him, but it disoriented him enough for Jessica to grab the knife and finish the job. Breathing heavily, Jessica stood over her captors, her mind racing. She knew she had to get out of there quickly. She grabbed a phone from one of the men and dialed 911. Moments later, sirens wailed in the distance. The police arrived to find Jessica standing in the doorway, bruised and bloodied but alive. She told them everything, her voice steady despite the horror she had endured. The media frenzy that followed was overwhelming, but Jessica remained composed, determined to reclaim her life. In the weeks that followed, Jessica worked with the authorities to ensure her captors were brought to justice. She also took steps to increase her personal security, vowing never to let herself be so vulnerable again. Her ordeal had changed her, but it had also made her stronger. Jessica continued her career, her followers more supportive than ever. She shared her story not as a victim but as a survivor, inspiring countless others with her resilience and courage. Jessica tried to put the horrific events behind her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was at play. The authorities had dismissed her captors as lone wolves, but Jessica had noticed inconsistencies in their stories during the trial. She began to suspect that her abduction wasn't an isolated incident. Determined to uncover the truth, Jessica started digging into the backgrounds of Mark, Ethan, and Liam. What she found confirmed her suspicions. They were connected to a shadowy syndicate that specialized in the abduction and trafficking of models. This syndicate was highly organized and dangerous, with connections reaching deep into the underworld. Jessica knew she couldn't take on such a powerful organization alone. She needed to become stronger, smarter, and more resilient. Her first step was to transform herself from a victim into a hunter. Jessica began a rigorous training regimen. She hired a personal trainer, Mike, to build her physical strength and endurance. Mike was a former Marine who took her training seriously, pushing her to her limits every day. Jessica lifted weights, ran miles, and engaged in high-intensity interval training. Her body transformed. She was leaner, stronger, and faster. But physical strength wasn't enough. Jessica knew she needed to learn how to fight. She enrolled in self-defense classes, learning techniques in Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Muay Thai. Her instructors were tough, but Jessica's determination impressed them. She trained tirelessly, mastering every move, every hold, every strike. Realizing the need for tactical skills, Jessica sought the help of Alex, a former military operative and a firearms expert. Under Alex's guidance, Jessica learned to handle various weapons, from handguns to rifles. She practiced shooting at a range, her aim becoming more precise with each session. Alex also taught her survival skills, including how to stay calm under pressure, how to move stealthily, and how to outsmart her enemies. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Jessica's mind hardened, her resolve strengthened. She was no longer the glamorous Instagram model who had been abducted. She was a warrior preparing for battle. Jessica's next step was to gather intelligence on the syndicate. She used her social media connections to discreetly contact other models who had gone through similar experiences. Many were too scared to talk, but a few brave souls shared their stories, confirming the existence of the syndicate. Among them was Emma, a model who had narrowly escaped an abduction attempt and was living in fear. Jessica befriended Emma, offering her protection in exchange for information. Using the data she gathered, Jessica identified several key players within the organization. There was Victor, a ruthless enforcer who handled the abductions; Marco, a former police officer who provided inside information; and Ivan, the syndicate's leader, a shadowy figure who rarely appeared in public. Jessica also discovered a network of safe houses and warehouses used by the syndicate to hold their captives before they were trafficked. Jessica knew she had to take them down one by one, starting with the weakest link, Marco. Marco frequented a seedy bar on the outskirts of the city, where he felt untouchable. Jessica watched him for days, learning his routines. She noticed he often drank heavily and left the bar late at night, usually alone. One evening, Jessica followed Marco as he stumbled out of the bar. She wore a disguise, a blonde wig, dark glasses, and a trench coat to avoid recognition. She waited until he reached a deserted alley before making her move. "Hey, Marco!" she called out, her voice cold and steady. Marco turned, his eyes widening in recognition. You're before he could react, Jessica lunged at him, delivering a swift kick to his stomach. Marco doubled over, gasping for air. Jessica grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the wall. "Tell me about the syndicate," she demanded, her voice low and menacing. Marco laughed, though it was a nervous, shaky sound. "You think you can scare me? You're just a model." Jessica pressed a knife to his throat, the blade glinting in the dim light. "I'm more than that. Now talk, or I'll make sure you regret it." Marco's bravado crumbled. He revealed information about the syndicate's operations, their safe houses, and their next target, a young model named Sarah. Jessica noted every detail, her anger boiling as she realized the extent of their crimes. Satisfied with the information, Jessica knocked Marco unconscious and left him in the alley. She called the police anonymously, ensuring they would find him and arrest him. With Marco out of the picture, Jessica turned her sights on Victor. Victor was known for his cruelty and his fighting skills. He operated out of an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district, a place where no one would hear the screams of his victims. Jessica knew she had to be careful. Victor was not someone to be underestimated. She spent days surveilling the warehouse, noting the comings and goings of Victor and his men. When the time was right, she made her move. Dressed in black tactical gear, she approached the warehouse under the cover of night, using the skills Alex had taught her to move silently and avoid detection. Inside, the warehouse was a labyrinth of corridors and rooms. Jessica navigated through it, taking down guards with swift, precise movements. She reached Victor's office, where he sat reviewing documents related to their operations. Jessica burst through the door, her gun trained on him. "Victor," she said, her voice steady. "It's over." Victor looked up, a sneer forming on his lips. "You must be Jessica. I've heard about you. Impressive, but you're out of your league." He lunged at her, and the fight was on. Victor was strong, but Jessica's training gave her the edge. They exchanged blows, each one more brutal than the last. Jessica's determination and anger fueled her, and she eventually gained the upper hand. With a final decisive strike, she incapacitated Victor, ensuring he would never hurt anyone again. With Victor and Marco out of the picture, only Ivan remained. He was the mastermind behind the syndicate, and Jessica knew taking him down would be the most dangerous task of all. Ivan operated from a heavily guarded mansion on the outskirts of the city. Jessica knew she couldn't storm the place alone, so she reached out to the few allies she had made during her investigation. Emma, now fully trusting Jessica, joined her along with Alex and Mike. Together, they formulated a plan to infiltrate the mansion and take Ivan down. The night of the operation, Jessica and her team moved stealthily through the grounds, neutralizing guards as they went. They used silenced weapons and hand-to-hand combat, ensuring they remained undetected. The mansion was a fortress, but Jessica's team was well prepared. They reached Ivan's study, where he sat, surrounded by security. Jessica took a deep breath, signaling her team to move in. A fierce battle ensued, with Jessica and her team fighting for their lives. Bullets flew and bodies fell, but Jessica's training and their meticulous planning gave them the advantage. In the end, it came down to Jessica and Ivan. He was a cunning adversary, with years of experience and ruthlessness. But Jessica's skills and determination prevailed. She cornered him, their eyes locking in a moment of intense confrontation. "This is for every life you've ruined," Jessica said, her voice filled with resolve. Ivan smirked, his eyes cold. "You're just a model. You don't have the guts." Jessica didn't hesitate. With a final act of defiance, she ended his reign of terror, ensuring he could never harm anyone again. The syndicate was dismantled, and Jessica's ordeal finally came to an end. She had avenged herself and the other victims, bringing justice to those who had suffered. Her story became a beacon of hope and resilience, inspiring others to stand up against injustice. Jessica returned to her life, forever changed by her experiences. She continued her modeling career, but also dedicated herself to helping others who had suffered as she had. She used her platform to raise awareness about the dangers lurking behind the glamorous facade of social media, ensuring that no one else would fall victim to the shadows that had once nearly consumed her. Jessica established a foundation to support victims of trafficking and abduction, providing them with resources and protection. She worked closely with law enforcement to ensure the syndicate's remnants were brought to justice, and she continued to train, vowing never to let her guard down again. Her story was far from over, but Jessica faced the future with newfound strength and determination. She had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, a true survivor who had turned her pain into power.